Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at polestar.com.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. I promised, I said to her, I'm not going to chuckle. I don't care how much he tries to make me chuckle this morning. I won't be chuckling. You made me chuckle. Well done, Kieran. Thank you, sir. That's what makes it for. It's yes. I think people will know why I've not been in a chuckling mood. It is questions day, Kieran. But let's briefly mention the massive news story. To be perfectly honest, I want to keep this mentioned as brief as possible because I'm palaced out. So God knows what the rest of the world. It's just that this last 48 hours, it's all become white noise. To be perfectly honest, there's two things that really, really anger me. If the prize for winning the FA Cup had been a place in the Europa Conference League, we'd have all been delighted, Kieran. We'd have been over the moon with that. But it wasn't. The prize for winning the FA Cup was a place in the Europa League. Whether or not finishing sixth in the French league should trump that is neither here nor there. Those are the rules. But we deserve to be in Europa League. And now, not only are we not in Europa League, we have to bloody qualify for the Conference League. And I can see how this plays out. Either UEFA will continue their perfidy and make us not seeded, so we play Fiorentina, or we'll play some Icelandic club who play the two best games ever in their whole history and manage to beat us 1-0. We won't even. But the thing that upsets me most, Kieran, and there's no personal animosity towards either of these clubs, towards their owners, yes, but not to their clubs or their fans. But if, as expected, Forest take our place in the Europa League and Lyon have got their place in the Europa League, you're basically rewarding two clubs who in the last two seasons have been fined enormous amounts of money or had points deducted for flagrant breaches of football finance regulations in their own league. That doesn't seem right to me, Kieran. It really doesn't. It's the one thing that doesn't sit well with me at all in this whole sorry business, apart from the fact that there's probably a meeting as we speak right now in Vienna, a Red Bull board meeting, and there'll be a picture of RB Salzburg at one end of the room and a picture of RB Leipzig at the other end of the room. And the first item on the agenda will be, that's funny, they let us in. But it's just that fact that two clubs who clearly aren't financially prudent are getting in a top competition that we should be in.
I can absolutely understand that. As an outside observer's point of view, I thought that Palace had a really good case to persuade UEFA that they were not part of an MCO. Now, we've not seen the evidence that was presented to UEFA. My concern is that John Textor is a loose cannon and he will probably try to take more credit. In fact, if he tries to take any credit for Crystal Palace winning the FA Cup final, I think that's too far. And that probably hasn't helped the case. I still believe that when the case goes to CAS, a well-designed and well-presented set of evidence that steps were taken, that Crystal Palace were not an MCO, because that was, I understand that's the view that was taken by the club. If they can evidence that, then CAS would have to take that into consideration. You know, my view is that CAS are more likely to take a substance over form review or perspective of this than a strict legal interpretation, which appears to have been the UEFA case. So I don't think it's an open and shut case, as many people seem to have thought. My view, Crystal Palace did not gain any financial advantage, or certainly they didn't gain any sporting advantage from John Textor's involvement. And therefore, if they had no sporting advantage, to give them a sporting sanction seems harsh. If we're going to say that blind trusts are the answer, then that is farcical, because we saw, and this isn't a dig at Nottingham Forest, they played the rules. But if you're going to have a set of rules, and this came to me from somebody high up in football over the course of the weekend, if you're going to have a rules that a blind trust means that somebody can't get involved in a football club, then that person cannot be walking onto the pitch at an end of a match for a chat with a manager.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're out of this yet. The CAS verdict presumably will be the defining moment. It's I can absolutely understand it's like left a nasty taste in your mouth. On a practical point of view, going into the conference, going to Iceland, going to Azerbaijan, winning the competition, you're going to have a whale of a time.
Yeah, if we qualify. Yeah. The problem is, I know we're on a time limit today, Kieran, and we've got a lot of questions, but by all accounts, John Textor's an affable, genial man. The trouble is, he comes across as the sort of affable, genial man who sits in a pub and tells people he used to be in the SAS, right? Which is essentially what he's done. He said, "I'll get you a job at Palace. I own the place. Don't you worry." And you wait for him to listen to that rather than the reams of evidence that we put forward. Let's. We've got some cracking questions, Kieran. Hopefully, we can get through as many of them as we can, bearing in mind your timescale, and bearing in mind that we've already had done an interview this morning, which was fantastic, but went on longer than both of us had.
It was geezers. It was geezers around the table.
It was geezers around the table. It was a very good interview. The first question comes from Chris Stout, and Chris says, "I've been having a debate with friends because I think Chelsea should win the WSL easily every season because their spending on players and wages is far greater than anyone else in the league. But I've realised I can't actually prove this. Spending tables are easily available for the men's Premier League and big European teams, but I can't seem to find the same sort of data for the women." Is Chris looking in the right place?
He is looking in the right place. You can find out the revenue of all of the clubs. You can find out the spending in terms of transfer fees on all the clubs. But strictly, Chelsea women's football team comes within the realms of what is defined by the Companies Act as a small company. And on that basis, it has a revenue of less than £15 million. Now, if you are a small company, you do not have to show full data. Now, many clubs do show the data voluntarily because they believe in being transparent. Perhaps transparency is a dirty word at Chelsea. That's not for me to comment. So it is frustrating. They certainly are the second largest club in terms of revenue, following that of Arsenal. If it's a big successful business, and clearly it must be, given that it was sold and it was valued at £245 million very recently, it does seem inconsistent with that approach to not being willing to show people this is a fantastic investment opportunity and showing the wages figures.
I mean, there can't be many small companies, Kieran, as defined by not having to share accounts that have gone for that amount of money. I mean, God love it. I mean, I thought mine was a relatively small company, my one, but really, that's how can they? You almost admire the chutzpah that they can use that argument on one hand and say, "Oh, it's worth 225 million quid on the other."
Yes. I mean, look, they've been fantastically successful, and they deserve credit for that. Their crowds are mixed. I mean, the crowds at Kingsmeadow between 2,000 and 4,000. Yes, they get more at Stamford Bridge. Arsenal have done fantastically well in terms of generating match day income. I think I saw in a table, I think Arsenal's women's team have the 17th highest average attendance in the country for all football.
Wow.
So that includes, so it's greater than that of some Premier League clubs, and they deserve an awful lot of credit for that. So, I mean, I don't know when Chris sent in this question. Arsenal did win the Champions League and deserve fantastic credit for that. We've just seen Arsenal break the women's transfer fee, first £1 million transfer, and I think that's really intriguing as well. So I don't think Chelsea are going to win it easily every year, because Arsenal are taking this very, very seriously.
Well, they have done since the start. That's why they've made a jump on everyone else in a way, Kieran, haven't they? You talk about the Premier League broadcasting deal getting ahead of anybody else in Europe, and that's exactly what Arsenal have done in women's domestic football, isn't it?
Yes, and they deserve huge credit for it.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep. Maxwell Young has an interesting one. Maxwell Young says, how have clubs' revenues changed in terms of the mix between domestic and international fans? I'm referring to the split between TV, match day and merchandise income. I'm assuming that generally the international proportion has grown massively, but is this different for the big six versus the other 14? And certainly one of the huge differences in football in the last 10 years, Kieran, is the number of overseas fans you see at clubs like Tottenham, for example. So I'd be interested in the answer to this question.
Yes, clubs are obliged to show something called a segmental report, which breaks down revenues. Now, according to the accounting rules, you can do that in one of two ways. You can do it by business class, and this is the approach which is taken by practically every club, in the sense they'll split it between broadcasting, match day, and commercial. Some clubs will also show the international split. I think it is fair to say that the big six, I'd add to that Wrexham, by the way.
Oh.
I've got Wrexham's accounts. Wrexham generate more than 50% of their revenues from overseas interests.
Wow.
Which is an incredible achievement. And then I think it starts to get a little bit more complex, because if we take a look at broadcast revenue, for example, overall, if you take a look at the Premier League's own figures, more than 50% of the Premier League's broadcast deal now comes from overseas deals. And again, I think the Premier League deserves a huge amount of credit here, because they've got first mover advantage. In 1992, they went to Thailand, they went to Nigeria, they went to Australia, they went to America, and they said, we've got this new product. Football was, people forget, or people weren't even born. Football was a pariah sport.
Yeah.
We know that.
Yeah.
We lived there. We've still got the scars, physical and mental, on occasions, in reference to that. And they said, look, we're going to give this away to you. And everybody says you're absolutely mad. And they actually lost money on those initial deals, but they were visionary. And they, again, hat is doffed where hats deserve to be doffed. And what the broadcasters found was there was huge enthusiasm for it. The jeopardy involved, the fact that you had the big clubs like Manchester United and Arsenal battling for those initial 10 to 12 years was really good. And that meant that when the Premier League came to renew those deals, they said, we can sign up for another 3, 4, 5 year deal, but this time we're going to put it out to tender this time. And what the broadcasters found, the one thing that stops people cutting the cable is live sport, which has an emotional investment. And you can't get a bigger product than the Premier League. So I'm sorry, Maxwell, I can't really give you the detailed figures because the clubs don't produce them. But certainly as far as as broadcast revenue is concerned, that is now greater from overseas than domestic. Some clubs will have the data in terms of to whom they sell tickets, and they could give out that information, but they will say this is private and confidential, it's commercially sensitive, and therefore we choose not to. And I can understand that as well.
Just using Wrexham as an example, say, Kieran, that overseas investment you talked about, would that include sponsorship as well?
Well, that's a funny one, because in my view, you're sponsoring Wrexham to play in League Two and League One. So Wrexham have done spectacularly well in terms of sponsorship, in that they're attracting the likes of Aviation Gin and TikTok and United Airlines. And whilst those are international companies, do Wrexham classify that as international revenue? I'm not so sure, because you think about Palace's front of shirt sponsor, Brighton's first, practically every year. How many domestic front of shirt sponsors are there?
Point, yeah.
Certainly in the Premier League. You probably get more in the lower leagues, because they tend to be more targeted to a smaller demographic.
Tom Mullally has a question, Kieran, that will be interesting to our guests on the interview this week. So we spoke to Andy Payne, who's part of the West Ham Fan Advisory Board, and we talked to Martin Cloak about fan engagement at Tottenham, in particular the Save Our Seniors campaign. But Tom Mullally has a question about West Ham. He says, trawling through my club West Ham United's company's house records, they seem to indicate they've received finance up front on their payments due from the Premier League. Now, this seems to be on central funds from TV rights and basic award, says Tom. Is it common practice for clubs to receive upfront financing for future incomes this way? I mean, we know it's common for Barcelona, Kieran, as they've pretty much mortgaged the next 100 years' worth of money coming in up front. But is it common in the Premier League for people to assume they're getting the Premier League money and therefore spend it before they get it?
Well, first of all, the Baroness saw this question, and she says if Mrs. Tom wants to get into contact with her, she's thinking of setting up a help group for wives of blokes who are now addicted to Company's House.
Well, let's not assume that he's, he may not be married. He might absolutely. He may have a life partner of a different designated.
Yeah. That is fair enough.
But still, but this support group is
this support group
supports everyone.
Non-denominational. It's agnostic in terms of your partner. It does happen in quite a few clubs, and what will happen is that normally the football club will borrow from a bank, and that can be the sort of domestic banks. It can be the likes of Santander and Barclays and so on. Or alternatively, you can borrow from one of the specialist institutions, the likes of Macquarie, for example, who are very big into this. And they will, and I know I upset clubs, and I upset some people in the finance world here, they will effectively give you the equivalent of a payday loan in the sense that you borrow money, and when you receive the monies from the Premier League, which will be normally this year's guaranteed payments, and then what tends to be the case is you probably have to pay back some of that loan over the course of the next 12 months, because you could, of course, be relegated. And so the loan will also say, should the club be relegated, we're entitled to cash flows from the parachute payments for the next 2 to 3 years. Now, if you avoid relegation, what tends to be the case is that there will be a rollover agreement between the two parties, which effectively restarts the clock to say, well, we'll carry on lending based on your Premier League revenues. So it does happen for a few clubs. The rates of interest reflect the perception of risk as far as the lender is concerned. So that would be linked to whether the bank thinks there is a small, medium or large chance of the club being relegated. And on the basis of that, the monies are forwarded. A letter also has to go to the Premier League to advise them that this is the nature of the relationship. And if you go on to Company's House, you will find these documents. They can often go on for 20, 30, 40 pages. I wouldn't recommend it as a hobby. Stick to stamp collecting, Tom.
I'm hoping it's not Tom's hobby. I mean, if it is Tom's hobby, then the question of what sort of partner he has is moot, Kieran, because I think the answer is possibly none.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
This episode is sponsored by Shopify. When we started The Price of Football and things started to take off, it all got a bit overwhelming at times as we were suddenly sorting out recordings, interviews, live shows, and our online store. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify.
Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. With Shopify, you get your own design studio that includes hundreds of ready-to-use templates. You can accelerate your content creation with Shopify's AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. And you can easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify.
Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/priceoffootball, all lowercase. So go to shopify.co.uk/priceoffootball to take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.co.uk/priceoffootball. Evidence of recent seasons would suggest, Kieran, there are probably 10 clubs in the Premier League who are at no risk of getting relegated in the next 5, 6, 7 seasons. So for them and for the banks lending them money, this would be a fairly safe investment, wouldn't it? Because you know that the broadcast money, it's going to be there. Yeah, but bar a worldwide financial collapse of unprecedented, and no one's saying with one of the guests at the Club World Championship final last night that can't possibly happen. But that's a safe investment, isn't it, for any banks lending money to those top 10 clubs?
It is. There's two issues. Could the club borrow from the owner at a cheaper rate or at zero rate of interest? So that's one alternative. And what's the attitude of the lender? It does vary from bank to bank. So yes, it does happen. It's a lot cheaper to borrow money on a secured basis than an unsecured basis. So that is something which you have to bear in mind.
Our next question, Kieran, I'm looking at it, I imagine it's going to be a very short answer. But it comes from Stefan Pfister. And Stefan Pfister says, what player transactions or formal agreements, if any, are allowed to occur outside transfer windows?
Well, there's two common ones. There is an emergency goalkeeper provision. But if you've got two keepers and they both... He's friendly, mate. He's friendly. So you probably saw the hand signal. Cheers, bud.
It's the reason I'm laughing so much. I didn't want to draw attention to your hand signals. In which case, I've never actually owned a dog, Kieran, being a cat person. But to the best of my knowledge, being in the houses of friends that do own dogs, holding your hand up and making a shush gesture at them doesn't tend to work, and it clearly didn't. Your trust in Finley's ability to read your body language here, Kieran, was lovely. That just shows that bond between dog and owner, except that Finley didn't recognise any of it.
Well, he sees his role in life as that of a guard dog.
Yeah, fair enough.
Even though you've met him and he'll sell his soul for a fresh pair of slippers.
Well, some guard dog in him, which makes him a lovely dog. Of course he does, So anyway, emergency goalkeeper loans.
So we have emergency goalkeeper loans. You can sign players who have been released and who are out of contract. And what you will sometimes see is that if the player wants to go and the current club, for whatever reason, don't want to carry on employing him, then there can be a mutual agreement. So if I give here the example of Danny Welbeck, he went from Arsenal to Watford. Watford, I think, had been relegated, and all of a sudden he announced he was being released from his contract, and hey presto, pure coincidence, an hour later he signs for Brighton. So if the selling club, for want of a better phrase, knows that it probably won't get a fee for the player for whatever reason, then some sort of workaround is feasible. The third scenario is that some leagues have sort of relaxed approaches to the loan market, which is also supposed to broadly close. I don't think that's the case in the Premier League, but I think in some of the other leagues, it is possible to utilise the loan market outside of the formal windows.
And what about those few players that are free agents, Kieran? Can they operate outside the formal windows?
Yes, because we're talking about a player transfer. Now, if you are effectively out of contract, by definition, your registration is not held by a particular club, and therefore you're deemed to be a free agent, and a free agent is allowed to join a club. I think we've seen that with the likes of Ibrahimovic and Messi at times, or that technically they're free agents and they go from one club to another.
Our next question, Kieran, I don't think has a short version as an answer. But the long version will be here all day, and there are two other questions to get through that I really want to ask you. They're very good, as good as the other questions, but they're two good questions to finish up with. But this question comes from Chris Davis, and again, it's one of those questions that we're asked on a periodic basis, not just on the pod, but this is one of those questions that people will sidle up and ask you. But I'm happy to talk about those things because they're clearly things that are at the top of fans' minds. And Chris says, with regards to financial fair play, PNS, whatever you want to call it, which appears set up to keep the top teams at the top and by extension the top teams in the Champions League and stop other teams from reaching these levels, could the rules therefore not be seen as anti-competitive and be challenged in a court of law? It's a question that comes up time after time, the anti-competitive nature, it seems, of the FFP regulations.
Yes, I mean, there is a very good case for saying that in their present format, the rules are there designed to create a glass ceiling, to reduce clubs who have ambition to break into the big group. And therefore, could they be deemed to be anti-competitive? I spoke to one of our secret lawyers over the course of the weekend, and they said they could certainly launch a case. The outcome was, of course, it depends, which can only be the answer. Yeah. But they did say it would be deemed to be such a big case, especially if it goes through a formal court, that it could take years to get a verdict. So we could be having this conversation in 4 or 5 years' time, and the owners might no longer be the owners. It would certainly be expensive. But our secret lawyer did say, keep your ears open. He said, I'm anticipating a big case verdict over the next few weeks, and it's not anything to do with Manchester City.
Ah, okay, that's interesting. I don't know, it's very interesting. I suppose, though, Kieran, the difficulty of proving the anti-competitive nature of this is that what you're talking about is those top teams at the top who would be there anyway, because they're the clubs that are the richest, and they're not necessarily the richest because of FFP rules. If FFP rules didn't exist, those clubs would still be the clubs that were dominating the league and were getting in the Champions League every week. That's the simple answer, isn't it? That's why those clubs are at the top. They don't need to flout the regulations. They've got enough money to buy the best players and the best managers, and that's what keeps them ahead of the likes of Brentford, Palace, and Brighton.
That's right. But what if you are Newcastle or Aston Villa, where you've got new owners who have come in and have said, we're willing to be the fourth leg. Presently we've got revenues from broadcasting, commercial, and match day. We're willing to provide that level because before FFP, that's what Sheikh Mansour did at Manchester City. That's what Roman Abramovich did at Chelsea. And there's a very good case for saying that had FFP been introduced in 2001 or 2002, the success of those two clubs would not have arisen because the cost control rules would have acted as an anchor. They would have restrained and restricted the ability of those clubs to be super competitive as far as player recruitment, retention, and paying transfer fees was concerned. And we would still broadly have the same duopoly of Manchester United and Arsenal winning everything as we did before Abramovich came in as a disruptor. And therefore, is there a case for saying that Newcastle and Villa are victims of a point in history? They were on the wrong side of history as far as FFP was concerned, because if PIF had bought Newcastle in 2002, they would have won the Premier League 3 or 4 times by now.
Yeah, sure. David Walton has our penultimate question. It's very touching the way you just look down at Finley's empty basket there. Where's he gone, by the way?
He's back.
He's back. He is back.
He was just growling.
He makes a lot more noise going out than he does coming back, doesn't he?
Yes.
You could say that about a lot of males, couldn't you? Really?
Well, yes.
David Walton has our penultimate question. And David Walton's question is this. Announcements of new player signings are normally accompanied by a pounds a week figure that are in some cases eye-wateringly huge. But what do these figures contain or exclude and classify as perks or a bonus? And is that weekly figure worked out over 52 exact weeks? So also, are clubs getting smarter of how they put player packages together, where there's less guaranteed weekly wage and more performance-based payments, and therefore managing their exposure to expensive bench warmers, keeping the wage bills high?
This is a very fair question, David, and the best answer would be given around a table in a pub with me and Kevin. We would be pointing at various things and jabbing fingers and saying, well, I've heard, on a regular basis. Yeah. But I can give you the official price of football answer. The figures that are quoted in the press are made up. There is a website called Capology, which people seem to take as gospel. I call it crapology because, in my view, I remember when Caicedo was at Brighton, and apparently, according to Capology or something like that, he was on $4,500 a week. Okay, well, I think he's probably a bit more than that. Yes. But I think David is right to question the nature of the payments. I think what people would normally believe to be a pounds per week figure would be a base salary, but practically every Premier League contract, according to my understanding, is very highly incentivized. You've only got to look at, for example, Manchester United's wage bill between 22-23 and 23-24. Manchester United didn't qualify for the Champions League, so their total wage bill was down by 15%. And that would have been very much impacted by the fact that players have very highly incentivized contracts, which are linked to the success of the club. I know one club where if the club finishes in the top 10, everybody gets a 10% bonus, and that's down from T-Lady to captain. But there's appearance bonuses. There are average attendance bonuses. There are bonuses for each individual place in the Premier League. I was talking to one club recently because they say, well, you're always quoting the £3.5 million extra revenue that goes to the club for each one position that you are higher up in the Premier League. But why don't you ever mention that 750 grand of that immediately goes to the players, and then potentially that we, if we finish in a certain position, we've signed a player. There are add-ons from the transfer fee, and I took it on board. It was valid criticism in the sense that I harp on far too often about revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. Well, you've got to look at it from a payments perspective as well. So that's the first question. Is the weekly figure over 52 weeks? Yes, it is. Does it include bonuses? I think it normally includes expected level of bonuses. So, for example, and I'm not picking on one player, Marcus Rashford, by all accounts, according to the media, is on a contract that pays him £350,000 a week. I would expect that to be assuming that he's picked for the squad. Now, people might be able to correct me on that, and it could be that he gets bonuses on top of that. But I think you set a benchmark. Let's face it, you wouldn't be offering him that contract if you didn't expect him to be playing every week. So it could actually be lower, given that there appears to be a breakdown in the relationship between player and coach. As far as the remaining part of David's question is concerned, is there less guaranteed weekly wage and more performance-related payments, and making exposure to expensive bench warmers, keeping wage bills high? Yes, it is. And I think Chelsea are probably a prime example of this. That they have a huge squad, and they certainly have been briefing the press that a lot of players are on a very, very low basic if they're not making that starting 18 as far as the squad is concerned.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
I know we've mentioned this before, Kieran, but I still find it fascinating that we talk about footballers in terms of their weekly wage. It's a hangover from the old days when they were working class chaps, but we don't talk about the salary at all, do we?
No, and yet when Thomas Frank goes to Spurs, or Tottenham, as we should officially call them.
No, we can't call them Tottenham.
No, the official price of football title.
Oh, of course, Tottenham. Yeah, no, we can call them. Yeah, we can't. Yeah.
It was said, he's on a salary of £8 million a year, and that is a reinforcement of what you might call production labour, factory labour, and footballers are still seen as, despite the very rich payments that they receive from clubs, they are still seen as being the factory floor of the football club. And yet, and I'm as guilty as this, because I always put out how much chief executives are paid, and that's always on an annual basis rather than a weekly.
Yeah, we're good. We're saying Tottenham just to annoy Daniel Levy. Good. Yes. As long as that's the reason we're doing it, I'm perfectly happy with that. Richard has our last question, just Richard, which indicates that Richard didn't have a lot of confidence in this question. But Richard, you should have been proud enough to put your full name, because I think this is a you talk about discussing David's question around a pub table. This one is a classic, cracking pub table conversation, because I don't think there is an answer to it. This is a brilliant one, because Richard's question is, which club is the largest, smallest club in the world? As in, which club has punched above its weight more than any other?
This is a football question.
It's a cracker, isn't it? Is it?
Yeah, it's an absolute perler. I've written down Athletic Bilbao.
Well, okay.
Because they only pick players from the Basque region.
Right.
So to have achieved the level of success that they've done. I've got Union Berlin. I've got Dundee United under Jim McLean.
Wow, okay.
Because I just love Dundee. I love Dundee United under Jim McLean, the most Scottish person in the history of the world. As far as the Premier League is concerned, I would say Brentford.
Right, yeah.
Because they got the second lowest attendance. They only change their kit once every 2 years. They've got a lot of what you would call nurturing policies. And around the rest of Europe, I've got to be honest, ultimately money talks.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear Union Berlin is on that list. There are links between Palace and that club, between Palace fans and that club, and it's one of the best away days I've ever had. And when I also just sit back and wait for the tweets about this, because this is one of those, I know our audience, this is one of those where what about we're going to get people in Honduras going, what about my club? Thank you to everyone who has joined the Price of Football Club. If you'd like to join that club too, you'll get every episode a day earlier than everyone else. You'll get ad-free listening and invite to our monthly Q&A sessions, special questions, pods, topical ones, bonus episodes, all sorts of stuff. You can do all that by going to our website, priceoffootball.com. We might even send you a picture of Finley. Who knows? If you've got a question you'd like answered on the show, then you can email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter X, you can find us on YouTube, and if you'd like to buy one of our books or a Price of Football t-shirt, you can go to that very same website to do that, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back Friday with our interview with Andy Payne and Marty Cloak. It's a very good interview it is too. But then we'll be back mainly. No, we won't be back. It's Christmas. Sorry, no wonder you look confused. We'll be back on Thursday. Yeah, unless I've really got the hump with UEFA and I've stormed off somewhere to Switzerland. I'm doing a one-man picking line. We'll be back on Thursday with our news pod. And so in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you to everybody. Thank you also to, especially over the past few days, to all of those Morecambe fans who have said thanks for standing up for Morecambe. We are with you totally in terms of the very poor governance and ownership that's being shown by Justin Whittingham, and we will continue to highlight this. As if whatever's developed over the course of the last 7 days, I can guarantee we'll cover for you on the Thursday show. Various ways you can support the show, one of which is to give us a review. It helps us in the charts. If you want something a bit more feisty than you're seeing on the regular Price of Football, why not say, I'd rather see the show presented by Alexander Seferin of UEFA and Kevin Bell.
It'll be a short one. That'll be a very short one, trust me. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.